Real life.
Superpowers.
In business, it's really easy to say, like if you're an assistant for the CEO and the CEO says, hey, that person, I don't want to talk to them today. Can you just make up a lie and say that like, I had to go home because I don't feel well? We would never, ever do that at Charity Water. So we would always find either a way to say, sorry, this, so-and-so isn't able to speak with you today. Meaning like that's not a lie.
Yeah.
But, so even like those little tiny details we care deeply about because we realize there's no way we can live with integrity if we're wrapped up in a bunch of, lies that we can't keep track of.
Hello all. Today we speak with Vik Harrison, who's most known as the co-creator of Charity Water, a nonprofit that provides drinking water to people in developing nations. Since it was founded in 2006, Charity Water has inspired a movement of 1 million supporters from 100 countries, and to date, they've helped 10 million people around the world get access to clean water. Vik is the brains behind the charity's design and branding. She's played a major role in its success. She now has her own consulting firm, The Branded Startup, where she brings all her knowledge and experience to help purpose-driven entrepreneurs and nonprofits clarify their vision and tell their story. If you've heard of Charity Water, you probably already know why this episode is a gem. If you haven't, you're about to find out.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. It's alive!
Real life.
Superpowers.
So Vik, welcome to Real Life Superpowers.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. What are you up to these days?
I'm doing a little bit of everything. I'm a mom of 2 kids, and that's obviously the most important role. And that means I juggle trying to work and also parent. And that has been very interesting during COVID because school unexpectedly can shut down at any moment. And then I'm, trying to work around kids. And so that's the most important thing that I focus on is figuring out how to parent and work. But I'm also, we just bought a farm about 8 months ago. So I'm getting excited to start planting a garden.
Where did you move from?
We moved from New York City. So during COVID, when everything got shut down, we just figured when Scott, my husband, who's the founder of Charity Water, moved our entire organization to remote, we decided, there's no more a really compelling reason holding us here in New York City. And we've always wanted to live somewhere else. So we are on a farm in Pennsylvania, about 2.5 hours outside of New York.
Wow, that's quite the change.
Huge.
And how does it feel?
Amazing. I mean, it's definitely, I get these very, piercing moments of missing my hometown, New York City, where I grew up for 25 years. But most of the time when I see my kids running barefoot in the grass, it's all worth it.
Yeah, it's quite the change, like in the mindset. Do you feel like, there's some sort of electricity in New York City of doing and, being where the action is? Like, do you feel left out or are you comfortable where you are?
I think I miss just what New York City made me. And that's kind of where that's what I've figured out is my reason behind missing it most of the time is just that it has shaped who I am at the very core. I moved to New York when I was 9 I was a Russian immigrant. My family came to the United States when I was 9 years old from Russia. I spoke no English. We moved right to Brooklyn. Then I went to art school in Manhattan. I grew up. I met Scott. I built my career in New York. And it's made me, a real New Yorker. And so coming out to the country, it's very different. And it's also really interesting politically because I'm sure you've been following, everything's been going on in the United States over the last year or 4 years with the president and everything going on. And I really get now to see what the other half of America, is talking about with Republicans versus Democrats. And out here, there's farmers who have lost their jobs, who have lost their livelihoods. And it's really interesting to get to meet the people that I think in many ways the very, city Democrats kind of demonize, and really see that they're real people underneath it all. And I think that's a really good experience for me and for my kids and for my family to get to really see the other side of the argument.
So that's something that I like. A lot of people are like, that I know, very successful business people like yourself, they changing because of the COVID, something, pivot, very, it's like an epiphany moment or excuse to do what they really want to do, which is a good thing. And I think that's one of the things that people are like, okay with it. Right. So, but the two things that I find the most fearful for them is, one, how to motivate themselves every day to be an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur, you take responsibility of others. And when you're far away, you're responsible for yourself. And that's kind of scary because you have to manage yourself, and people aren't managing you. Even though you're the boss, they still manage you, right? They call it their problems, whatever, and you're far away. The second thing is moving. And as an entrepreneur, you're going to see different opportunities because you're going to see different challenges. So it's actually changing a little bit of mindset. So those two fear outcomes, like how do you navigate between them? And is there any, kind of questions in your mind to pivot or to challenge what you're doing till now?
Absolutely. It does. It really does challenge you, because I think when you're an entrepreneur in a big city like San Francisco or LA or New York or, Tel Aviv, you are around that energy all day long. And then when you exit that environment and you are kind of then forced to self-motivate, it can definitely change things, but I think for me specifically, and for myself and Scott, we became parents before we moved out here, and we were parenting our kids in New York City, which was hard because you're sort of constantly living in this tension. When you're single or when you're married without kids, you can devote pretty much most of your time to your career. But then when you become a parent, you have to spend time with your family unit in order to raise healthy, happy kids.
Do you have to? Is that the right word to put it? Do you have to? I think I'm going to challenge that. I'll tell you why. Because the have to thing, there are solutions, and people who say have to, they usually say, I want to. They're scared to say it, and that's okay. And then I'm saying, if you want to, okay, so what is the price of that? Like, this is interesting for me. I'll tell you why, because we're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, and for me, I'll say it, okay? I don't have the heart not to want to, right? So if you give me the challenge, then I'll say, if I have to say, yeah, I just wanted not to be with my kids, I'll physically feel bad and I'll have laryngitis, right? So I can't, my conscience is big, but what is the price of that? And how do you manage yourself? Like, because you're an entrepreneur, this is actually the question. What are your boundaries? How do you manage that? Like, what is the do's, don'ts?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of your question, have to or want to, I honestly sometimes have to force myself to get off the computer or get off the phone. Spending time with a 4-year-old as an adult sometimes can be pretty hard, because there's only so many minutes I have the patience to sit and play blocks or play with a train set. I'd rather, way rather be writing an email to my email list or planning my next course, etc. So, but I know that I would have nothing if I didn't raise, healthy, emotionally healthy children. And that means spending time. Children understand quality, not quantity of time. So that's how I feel about that. And the second part of your question about boundaries, I have found, so I'll just tell this story because I think it's the best way to answer the question. I had wanted to launch a course for nonprofits. I wanted to launch a course for a very long time, for about 4 years, and was always scared to do it and didn't know where to get started, how to put the content together. But really underneath all that, what was going on for me was I didn't know. I wasn't sure that people would want to see my content out there and would want to engage with the course, to buy the course. And when I had a lot of time, so before COVID, both my kids were in school full time, and I had 5 days a week of work time to myself. And I would spend month after month procrastinating and creating free content for my audience, and kind of pretending like that's what I needed to do before I could launch the course. But really, underneath it all, I think I was just scared. When COVID hit and we were all cooped up in this house together, when it was seemingly, and we just bought the house, we had so much going on, it seemingly was the worst time to launch a course, is when I actually launched the course. I locked myself in my office for 6 weeks. I put all of the content together. I shot 12 videos. I wrote the scripts for everything, set it all up. And it was actually the lack of time that forced me to just get it done. So in a way, I think when you have a lot of time, you tend to waste it and take it for granted. When all of a sudden you have a deadline in 6 days, you're balls to the wall, just forced to get it done. So I actually announced my launch date before I had any of the content created, which scared the crap out of me. I said, okay, in 6 weeks on September 15th, the course is launching. Here's what it's going to be about. I created a landing page. And then I basically didn't sleep for probably 2 weeks because I was terrified. But then I got it done and it was awesome. And you know what? I look back at the lessons now and I'm like, if I had 6 months versus 6 weeks to create the course, I think the course would have been worse because I would have had too much time and I would have reshot things and been overthinking it too much.
Have you heard of Parkinson's law?
I have, but remind me. I mean, I'm. If you remind me, I'm probably, yeah. What does it say?
I read about it in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, and basically the law says a task will take as long as you let it. If you give it 6 weeks, it's going to take 6 weeks. If you're going to give it a week, you're still going to make it on time because it's just as long as you give it. Now, I guess there are some tasks where you just objectively need more time, but just what you're describing just makes me think about it because basically you couldn't afford now to let all those fears interrupt you because you had a deadline, which is a great way to sort of just get things done.
Exactly. And that's what I plan to do for everything in the future. It's just, there's two things that I think create those very good pressures to get things done. One is diving off a cliff and growing wings on the way down, or the belief that you can jump off the cliff and grow wings on the way down. And the second is that deadline. If you have those two things, if you give yourself a deadline and have that belief that like you'll just figure out how to do this when the pressure is on to do it, that's how I've gotten most of the scary things in my life done.
Is it outsourced? Like you have to say it out loud to a third party because, I'm sorry for the crazy note here, but when you get up in the morning and you say you want to run, right? There's this other side of you, which is really weird to say, but he says, no, you don't. You have to sleep for another hour, right?
Absolutely. It happens to me every day.
I know. So I was scared to say, but but there's this negative asshole in your mind that's saying, so you don't have to do that, right? And then my question is this, does it really help to actually say that statement and deadline to a third party, to someone else, to anybody, as opposed to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So in fact, that I would say that's the third component, which is, if I had set this deadline for myself in my own head and didn't tell anybody about it, I would have absolutely missed it. There'd be no chance that I would have met that deadline. But because I created a landing page and put it out on my social media and told everybody and sent an email saying this is the drop dead date, that's the only reason it got done.
It's sort of like strategy 1 and 2 are the same strategy, right? Because you're saying a deadline plus throwing yourself in the water, right? So
yeah. And it has to be a public deadline because I think a lot of people really do now talk about personal integrity. So keeping your promises to your own self are so important. That just doesn't seem practical to me because, it takes a very, very disciplined person who can keep their promises to themselves. And I know that they exist and I'm not one of them. So I need that outside accountability.
I gotta say, I'm listening to you and your humility really comes across, and it can get even a bit confusing because at the end of the day, I think it's fair to say that we're sitting here with one of the best storytellers in the world. And I'll tell you why I think this. I think the story of Charity Water is one that nobody can say indifferent to. And there are a lot of nonprofits out there, and the causes are all, not all, but a lot of them are so important. So it's very difficult to sort of even decide what you want to go with. But I'm an example of somebody who donates to charity water. And I think,
Thank you.
And of course, and I think part of the reason that I do it, if not the main reason, is the storytelling behind it, which I know and understand that you're behind. And I heard Scott, your co-founder and husband, talk about this a few years ago in a podcast interview. And then I heard him live at one of the Housepod conferences at Inbound in Boston. And both times I listened to him, like, I think anybody who listens to Scott tell the story and doesn't at least have a little bit of a tear in their eye, we got to go back and check what went wrong in their childhood, because it's just, you cannot just stay indifferent. And it's so amazing. Like, he goes up on stages and he tells the story and it converts. I'm sure of it, and I've read about it, but it's just logical that people listen to him and they feel like they want to be a part of this and do good. And it's just amazing on so many levels. And what I'm curious about is, was this intuitive?
Well, I entered the marketing world very young, 23 years old. And, I was fed this huge dream that I probably saw on television screens, as young as 9, 10 years old, when I would watch Cheerios commercials and just had this dream of, like, I want to be the person who makes those commercials. I want to be behind the scenes creating content, advertising. And when I got into the world of advertising, it was just this kind of incredible slap in the face almost, when I realized that so much of mass mainstream advertising, and this is back in 2003 to 2006 when I was in marketing, I realized that there was so much, fakeness in this world. And so much was spun up and created to sell products, obviously, but in not a very authentic way. And I saw, behind the scenes, the people who would make advertisements for Pepsi or for a cereal brand or for a brand of lipstick themselves didn't use those products, didn't believe in those products, would never eat those products. And yet they were creating the sexiest advertising for those products. And that began to sort of unravel this dream that I'd always had, and showed me sort of the dark side of advertising. And now I think I say the time frame because I think that a lot has changed in advertising. There's a study done by the Havas Group that over the last 10 years, there's so much decline in consumer trust of big brands. The study polled hundreds and hundreds of consumers, probably hundreds of thousands of consumers around the world, asking how many brands would they actually miss if those brands were gone, and determined that 73% of big name brands would not be missed by most consumers if they disappeared tomorrow. And that's where the more authentic and real advertising comes in, with, and sort of was timed with the dawn of social media, where now you can see the real faces and stories behind a brand versus the perception that they would like you to see on the front page of a newspaper or a magazine or a commercial. And, we found out over the last 15 years that a lot of brands just straight up lie and don't tell the truth, but that created this really desire and market for authentic storytelling instead of fake advertising. And that's where Charity Water sort of grew up in this new age of social media, of transparency. And we said from the very beginning, like, there's just nothing that we are going to hide from the public, and a lot of it was also a reaction to the fact that so many nonprofits had zero trust with the public. Half of Americans don't trust nonprofits. There are so many scandals over the years, mismanagement of funds, just complete embezzlement, lies. And we just wanted to counteract that from the very beginning, which is how we approached all of the advertising, all the branding, all of the marketing. We don't really say we market or advertise. We just say we tell stories.
And you do. But was that intuitive? Did you just feel sort of disgusted with the whole selling out and just commercial aspects of advertising, and that you want to do something with purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it was intuitive, but it was also intentional, if that makes sense. So we intuitively knew that, like, anytime we would see in the early days a brand telling an authentic, genuine story, whether it was about a customer or one of their employees, or even a fictional story to advertise their product or service, we would bookmark that. We would pass that around the office and we would say, look at this. This is what advertising should look like. It should be these human stories that we can all connect to. And that was just always something we talked about, that this is the kind of content we want to create. So it was both intuitive, but also intentional.
That's funny because it really surprises me when I saw it. What I thought was the seed of it, and I see that was wrong, was the connection that people want to be part of the story and not invest in other people's story, meaning the galas of getting people to donate. And they're so far from, I'm imagining, the gala of people dressed very nicely, spending money for the African starving child, which never they see where it went and why. Forget about embezzlement. It's for a different reason. I'm taking Phoebe and Friends as a reference, right? So she gave money, but she wanted to feel the feedback she's doing something good, and not being connected to the story, feeling every day that something's happening. And the epiphany when I saw it was the connection between the story and the person, feeling proud that he's actually helping. It is transparent, but I really thought that the epiphany was, if you connect people to how they're actually helping, they will be, crowdsourcing, seeing the outcome of the product. So I thought it came from there.
Well, you know what? It evolved into that. And that's an excellent point. I think there's so many things that make Charity Water what it is, and so much in that DNA. And you're right. One of them is we did not believe that people should just sit comfortably in their glass mansions and, give throwaway money to the charity just to write it off on their taxes. We believed people are better than that. We believed people had the capacity for generosity and compassion that was way beyond that. And that's what we called people into from the very beginning. And that came from Scott. Until this day, when he asks someone for a large donation, he makes it almost feel like that we're doing you a favor. We, Charity Water, are doing you a favor by letting you be a part of this amazing mission, cause, and story of ending the water crisis. And if you want to join us, awesome. We are on our way there already, and we would love to have you. But if you are not really passionate about it, then we'd rather not. Don't give us your money if you are not doing it with generosity, with a full heart, with passion. And that really resonates with donors, because I talk a lot in the nonprofit space about this, but donors don't like to smell desperation, right? When you come and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of money. Can you please help us? We're so sorry. These people need our work. We can't do this without you. Feel good.
On a business point, if I have to say a method, it's like you found a way to hack the retention rate as opposed to the conversion rate. So if someone converts to any nonprofit, that's fine. But then the sale is from the beginning saying, this year, how much do you want to put? As opposed to retention rate, seeing that the impact every time, he has to look at the impact himself. And then he always has it top of mind, meaning as opposed to, if I have two donations, one, I'm going to give the money, okay? Then I want to see the impact it does. Then you have there's people who want for the publicity, and there's people who want to donate because of the impact. Those people keep on donating, let's say Noah, for example, because they see the retention, they see the impact. So say, as long as it's impacting, and keep on going.
But it touches on what you're saying, Vic. I think I understand what you're saying now, because there's something about a nonprofit that calls you on their knees, talking about how you are their last chance, versus doing something that you feel confidence that the people leading it are on it, and you're joining something bigger than you. And in a sense, even if it's like not consciously, I'm not risking my money. It's not like I'm going to put it and they're going to cave tomorrow. I'm joining something bigger than me, and I'm going to say something not PC, but maybe cool, you know?
Yeah.
And that's also part of the narrative. Like there's something about Scott and his I used to be a party dude and everything to do with the story that, and I would love for you to break down that formula so that people can learn from it. But you sort of hacked the formula of how people exactly that can sort of feel like, hey, how can I join? And can you accept me? And it's a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That's like totally tilting the pyramid.
Yeah. And it's obviously we consciously try to never, ever exclude anybody, but we also realize that people like to give to something that's working. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it's the same with startup investing. Investors are going to invest in something that's working. So when people give to nonprofits, what they're really buying is the trust factor and the confidence factor, because you're not buying a physical product. So, when you shop for clothes or a car or furniture, the first thing you think about is, is this product a good value for the money that I'm going to spend? You don't necessarily immediately think, what are the values of this company? Is the founder a good guy or woman? Like, who are they at the core? No, you're like, is this chair worth $500 to me? Well, with nonprofits, all you're buying really is, how are these people going to manage my money? And are they competent? Are they passionate? Are they going to work really hard to make sure that my money is spent well? Are they going to show me results? How do they run their company? So you're buying trust in people. And that's why I encourage nonprofit founders to get in front of the camera, to be personable, to tell their story, to show their face, because it's important that we trust the people who are managing our money. And as far as I wanted to mention a book, because I keep having this thought come up. There's a book called The Human Brand, and it talks about the reason we trust brands as humans is the same reason we trust humans. It's like a proxy. And there are two qualities that make a brand excellent, essentially, or make people really attracted to a brand. And the qualities are warmth and competence. So the first thing is this brand, does it have warmth? Does it feel human? And this comes probably, in this book, the explanation is this comes almost from our lizard brain. When we would approach back as cave people, we would approach somebody. And the first thing we would have to figure out does this person mean me well, or does this person mean harm to me? And when they smile, when you can see their eyes, or when, they tell you a human story, that triggers a warm feeling for us. So warmth is number one. And the second one is competence. So the second thing that you, as a cave person, let's say, would look for is, okay, now that this person is not going to kill me or eat me or whatever, the second thing I want to know is, can they help me? Can they help me self-actualize or whatever? So the competence piece is second. And I think that's really, really, underneath it all, I think of the reasons Charity Water has been successful it comes down to really those two things. We work really hard to create a human connection with our donors. And then we also show them that, like, we're really competent.
I think that makes perfect sense. Let's maybe talk a little about storytelling, because I've heard Alex Bloomberg of Gimlet Media and Planet Money talk about that a bit. And he was saying, with respect to nonprofits, but I would say it's beyond, that people who manage a nonprofit, and again, I think that also applies to any company or startup that has a mission, they feel like once they have a mission, people should buy into it. And basically they get a little bit angry even, and they sort of feel like, because it's important, like they feel like you should understand it's important and you should pay, and you're a bad person if you're not. But in reality, where people have to prioritize and they can't choose everything, and at the end of the day, people are doing what they can, and it's just, I don't know, for an example, if a person is now becoming a vegetarian and now they feel everybody else should. But it's not enough to just be righteous And being righteous, I think, is a disease of nonprofits, but probably of startups in general. It's just easier to talk about nonprofits. And what Alex Bloomberg was saying is something made your heart spark. Something made you relate to this at a very deep level. And if you can tap into that reality and truth and communicate that, then you win. Because that's something people can now join you in and see this through your eyes. Can you relate to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why Scott's story works, because they see themselves in his story in one way or another. He was living for himself, going after the hot girls and the models and the money and the bottles and the private flights to Cannes when he was in his 20s and promoting nightclubs, and found him, doing drugs, drinking too much, all that stuff, and found himself in, at 29, hating what his life has become, because he was living only for himself, for his own pleasure and ambitions, and a lot of people get to that place. I got to that place at 24 before I met Scott with advertising. I had visions of myself walking in stilettos through an advertising office to my corner office. That's what I envisioned for my life. And quickly I realized, like, that's never going to make me happy, especially if I have to lie to sell these products that I don't believe in. Like, who am I going to be at 40 or 50 or 70? And what's my life going to mean? And Scott had that same revelation. He's like, I don't want my tombstone to say, "Here lies Scott Harrison, who got 1 million people drunk for a living." Now it's drunk in a different way. But so he wanted to change his life, and telling that story is why so many people relate to charity water, because at some point or another, we have to switch our motives from setting up our own life to contributing to the world in a bigger way. And that's what they see in the charity water story. I think that's really relatable.
Yeah, but like Vik, you realized this pretty early, and still you took quite the leap. Like, you left a promising day job and you just went all in on a nonprofit. Like, were you scared?
Yeah, I was 24. I didn't have children. I was pretty free, and I just believed in Scott. I believed, for whatever reason, because he didn't show very much promise in the beginning, but he was so dang insistent. And he was broke. He had no money in his bank account. We were working out of his Soho loft where he shared with like 3 roommates, one of whom was a heroin addict. So it wasn't like I went to a established nonprofit that had an office and paid me a salary. But he showed promise in the unconventional ways. He was a rugged entrepreneur, like never without his laptop. Every chance he got, he would crack that laptop open at restaurants, in train stations, to show people the story of, the story of his kind of life at that point, his trip to Africa. And I just had never met anybody like him before. So in that way, it wasn't so scary, because I knew this guy had like this raw potential. But I will say, when I mentioned we were immigrants, came to America, my family, they were not about what I did. They were so upset with me. They were like, "We did not bring you to this country, our only child, to leave your promising advertising career that we sent you to college for, so that you could go help people on a different continent and probably be poor for the rest of your life." Fast forward 15 years later, we have pretty good salary. We bought a home. Like, we're doing just fine. We actually help pay for my grandparents' rent. So now they're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. But that first time I broke the news to them, "Hey, Mom, I'm leaving this really nice advertising firm to go sit on this guy's couch in Soho and build this charity," they didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. They were mad.
That's harsh, but you still did it.
Yeah, I did. I felt like I got one life to live, and I don't want to regret when I'm 70 how I've spent that time.
That's deep wisdom for a very young girl.
I think taking risks, and I love this whole notion of like jumping and growing wings on your way down as a mantra for life in general, because it's just a really great way to live. And I haven't really put words to it, but it just feels like the right thing to do. To not be scared, to not be afraid to change your mind, like even just not be set in your ways. And, I think a lot of people in the stage of life that we're going to enter soon, right? Like when you turn like 38, 39, 40, 50, a lot of people stop being generative. They stop trying new things. They stop creating. They just sort of stop doing anything new.
You're not jumping off of cliffs, though. I'm sorry that I'm sounding like a fan of yours, but I am a little bit, because I'll tell you why. You're loyal to yourself, because you're jumping on certain cliffs that you're saying, I'll take a leap of faith as long as I'm loyal to myself, which is important to say, because we have people listening that the outcome is not just leaping. It's leaping with the loyalty that, you want to be loyal to yourself, so you're willing to take that leap because you have thought behind it, right? Because I don't want people taking risks. They're not loyal to themselves, right?
Absolutely. Or where it feels wrong. And I think that's a really important, thing to understand, that there's fear and then there's dread. So fear is something that in a way, is the right decision, but you're really scared. And dread is like this horrible feeling that like the universe or God or your own intuition is telling you, like, this is not for me. This is really bad. Do it. And I think that discerning between those two can be hard, but if you really like quiet yourself and you hear that inner voice, you will know what is something that you're supposed to do, but you're just scared, versus what you're scared of and you really aren't supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think so many people listening are really struggling doing a day job that they don't feel fulfilled in, but it's so difficult to take that leap of faith in themselves. And I think you're an example of somebody who did. And I think if it feels right, if you listen to your gut and it's visceral, it's going to be okay, especially at those ages, but also at the 38, 39s, because things work out. I don't know, like there's always, I think, a way to somehow revert back to where you were. I don't think things are not reversible. And I think it's really important to listen to the gut and to really feel, am I in tune with myself and with my values? And I think you're a real example of that. And also with respect, just you as a mini cosmos, but also as in Charity Water, that's actually conveying that to the universe and really being transparent and genuine and visceral as much. It's amazing that you can talk about Charity Water as if it's a being, as if it's possible to be visceral as a nonprofit, but it makes sense when I speak about it, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an expression of, the values that came out of myself and Scott that then really got transferred to every single person who works there. I mean, we are so intentional about only hiring people who are 100% aligned with every single one of our 5 values. If they're only aligned with 4 and not the 5th, we don't hire them.
What are the values?
Transparency, integrity, passion, humility. 5th one. So I don't, as you know, I haven't worked full time at Charity Water since, 5 years ago. So a little rusty, but but at least those are the 4, and I will remember the 5th.
It's fine.
Your integrity, by the way, by saying that you don't remember the 5th, by the way, works. So
I'm not going to make it up. I don't remember.
You're 4 out of 4. I hope the 5th is not, don't show that you don't know the 5th. Right? So,
Right.
Okay.
I think saying words like that is not enough as a company. Like just saying we value integrity means nothing to anybody.
Exactly.
Enron valued integrity, and many companies have said that.
Not with the transparency, the synergy. Synergetic. It's saying both of them together. If you have integrity, you can be transparent. So that's part of it, right? So
that's the best part about it is, I think the way Scott and I live, like in our personal lives, we both will never lie about anything in our entire personal lives ever. Like, and even at Charity Water, I mentioned the word integrity doesn't mean much. So we have a set of about 20 isms, like kind of like little micro stories or behaviors or examples of what those values mean. So one of the isms is no white lies. And we even go as far as saying, so in business, it's really easy to say, like if you're an assistant for the CEO and the CEO says, hey, that person, I don't want to talk to them today. Can you just make up a lie and say that like, I had to go home because I don't feel well? We would never, ever do that at Charity Water. So we would always find either a way to say, sorry, this, so-and-so isn't able to speak with you today. Meaning like that's not a lie.
Yeah.
But, so even like those little tiny details we care deeply about, because we realize there's no way we can live with integrity if we're wrapped up in a bunch of, lies that we can't keep track of. Lying is expensive. Lying takes a lot of brain power and time.
And memory.
And memory, exactly.
So how do you differentiate between someone who's white lying or the person who's sitting and doesn't know exactly what the problem is? Okay, so he's guessing what the problem is, but it's not the problem. You know what I mean? Like, how do you approach? Do you want me to give an example of what I'm saying?
I think I understand what you're saying. And if you don't know, then you're not lying. You're just...
Yeah, but if you're covering up for it, then you are.
But if you're going to be transparent and give him the answer, that it may be something that he can't confront right now. Like, I know I'm talking like as it's dramatic, but there's a lot of things like that. You sit beside a person and he's giving an excuse why he didn't deliver something. For him, it's the reality, right? Now you have to decide right now if you're going to be transparent and tell him that, which will actually consume an hour and a half to explain why you're not trying to humiliate him, but you're trying to give him a better outcome. Okay? And you don't have an hour and a half.
I think it's important to spend the hour. And that goes that now we're having a very, different conversation about managing people and investing in the people you lead. As a leader, if you don't have time to help your employees grow emotionally and grow in their maturity as human beings, then you're not going to get very far as a company, right? So I think that hour is very well spent. It's probably the most important thing you should do that day, is spend that hour.
Fair enough.
I love that. And tell us about the new startup then.
Oh yeah, sure. And I'll even tell the backstory of it, because this will go to show that leaving something you're comfortable with often is not a straight path to the next thing. So when I left Charity Water, first of all, I became a mom. I had 2 little kids, and everything was much harder after that because your time is not yours. So I first tried to write a short book because I thought, how do I teach some of these principles that we learned at Charity Water to other nonprofits? And I would sneak away for 2-3 hours here or there when my second was a baby, and my grandmother would come and she would babysit so I can go to Starbucks and like type on my laptop. And I wrote a pretty good book proposal. It was like 25 pages. I worked on it for, probably a year. And, but not full time, just in those kind of little windows that I would find. And I took it to a publisher and a couple publishers, and they said, the publishing world is different now. So if you want us to publish your book, you got to bring the audience. And at the same time, Scott was writing his book, and he had the power of Charity Water behind Thirst. So, his book gets published, he writes it, he gets it published, and bestseller. And Charity Water is really able to push and promote it. And I'm sort of left to realize, wow, okay, if I don't have a platform, if I don't have the people, the readers, the buyers, no one's going to publish it. And self-publishing just didn't feel like the right path to me. So I totally abandoned that. And that took a year to figure out that actually writing a book was not the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And of course I say, I'm very lucky that I had a husband who had an income during that time, that I could keep trying these things. A lot of people don't have that, and it is harder for them, but I think it's still doable. It is harder, so I'll acknowledge that. But that's my story. And after that, I decided, okay, you know what? I want to teach branding marketing to startups. And for whatever reason, I was trying to get as far away from the nonprofit world, maybe because I was trying to prove something to myself. So I was like, I don't want to teach nonprofits. I want to teach for-profit startups. I thought it was cool. I thought people would think it's cool that I'm doing that, and realized really that I was caring way more about what people thought about me than what I really was passionate about doing. And I sort of got caught up in that for a couple of years, thinking, well, if I leave Charity Water, I should do something fabulous that everybody is going to think is really awesome. And it just never felt right. So I couldn't really find my niche or like the people.
What was dreadful here? Because it sounds like the dreadful, not the fearful, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, and then I consulted for 3 months for a startup. That was the most dreadful experience. So a lot of people after Charity Water were like, you should consult. That's what people like you do. After you leave as the co-founder of a nonprofit like Charity Water, you should go consult. So I was like, okay, I guess maybe I should go consult. So, I just kept thinking like, what is going to make people admire me the most? Which is so silly because like after Charity Water, I should know better at this point, but we still go through those moments. And so when I consulted for 3 months, probably 2.5 years ago, I was flying to Austin twice a week. It was such a mess. The startup was very confused. Nobody knew what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't have any. The CEO just was like, come in and do whatever you want.
Work your magic.
Yeah, exactly. He literally said, work your magic. We want your magic here. And that should have been, if anyone says that to you, that's such a red flag. Such a red flag. Never, ever take a job where someone says, work your magic.
Right.
And it was horrible. I failed miserably. I didn't know what my magic was or how to work it. And
you didn't have partners. People were expecting you to pull something out of a hat.
Well, everybody also was threatened by me because I was the consultant flying in from New York, that the boss, the CEO, brought in without a job description. And she's supposed to work her magic. So does that mean she's going to fire me? Is she going to restructure the organization? What is she going to do? Right? Everybody was scared. Then it was terrible. And nobody, had my trust. I didn't have any buy-in anyway. And that really made me realize the difference between dread. Like I dreaded going there. I mean, it was only thankfully it was 4 months in the end. Dreadful experience. Great people, just
bad fit.
Bad fit, exactly.
And misalignment of expectations, because they're sort of expecting, like there's one CEO was saying, listen, I bought us like the best of the best to do something. You guys just listen. And in reality, it doesn't work that way. Huge
Misalignment. He wanted me to storytell. Everybody else was like, no, we got to make money. This is a startup. We don't have time. Anyway, so all that said, after that, I did a major life check-in again. Was like, Victoria, what are you doing? Like, who do you really want to help? And it took me right back to when I was 23 in marketing, thinking, I don't really want to sell stuff to people who don't need more stuff. And not to say that there's anything wrong with working in a marketing career. It was just not for me. That's not what I wanted my life to be about. And when I said, you know what, let me go back to kind of what I've always been passionate about, which is using marketing to sort of solve global problems and help make the world a better place. And that immediately, cleared my mind to say, well, I should be coaching nonprofits in marketing and how to tell their stories so that I can, at the end of my life, say maybe I coached 1,000 or 3,000 or 10,000 nonprofits to be more visible, to be more appealing to donors, to raise more money, to solve more problems that need to be solved in the world, to help more people. When I said that, when I believed that for myself, shortly after I launched my course, I made $100,000 in a year. Everything just fell into place because I stopped caring so much what other people wanted me to be doing and just did what I knew I should be doing and felt right for me.
And you also sort of went into quote unquote flow. So instead of questioning yourself and thinking, how do I test myself and who am I? And sort of putting some sort of light on yourself and getting your sort of shaken with your self-esteem and trying to see who am I without Charity Water? And now I have to throw myself into an arena that I'm not necessarily comfortable in, but I think I have to prove something. And sort of, I think when you stopped asking, how can I prove something and started asking, how can I be of value? Then you tapped back into you and to what you were always were. And Charity Water was just one outlet. And now you're just sort of arranging and channeling the same energy into other doing, but it's the same essence. And I think maybe along the way, you sort of lost your essence for various reasons. And it's okay. It's the journey, right?
Of course. By the way, I should pay you for this awesome therapy session. Thank you. If there's anyone listening who is a parent, that plays into, that shakes your confidence. If your identity is rooted in being an entrepreneur or someone who's a working person all your life, then all of a sudden you're staying home, you're in your pajamas every day, and you're like not only did I lose my identity at work as a boss, as a leader, and now you're sitting home with a baby all day long. Like both of those things happened for me at the same time, which really did. It really shook my confidence.
And it's so important to just be aware and sort of just understand, where am I and where on the scale of what I want to do and who I want to be am I right now? And sometimes it's just a matter of owning it and saying, you know what, I sort of lost my track, but now that I'm aware, I can find my way back to it.
Absolutely.
What do you think your superpower is?
Oh gosh, it's a very good question. I think, so I'm an Enneagram 4. I don't know if you know much about the Enneagram.
No.
No, you don't? Okay, you should absolutely read about the Enneagram. It's a personality typology. The ancient Romans used it, the Greeks, and there's 9 types of personalities. You can be on a spectrum of integrated versus disintegrated, meaning emotionally healthy or unhealthy. That manifests in different ways. I'm a 4. We're the most creative, also the most, we feel the most amount of emotions in a day. And so when I learned about my type, when I kind of typed myself and figured out, it's like there's a lot of these type tests, Myers-Briggs, etc. But they tell you a lot more about yourself. And so I think knowing all that I know, my superpower really truly is being myself, like authenticity. Like I just cannot be someone that I am not for very long, so trying to write a book, trying to be a consultant, all those things fizzled out very quickly because I just cannot pretend to be somebody that I do not feel like I am. So I think I would have to say it's authenticity, even though I kind of hate that word because it's so overused.
So I wrote this down. This is my magic trick, right? I wrote this down. I call it accountability, right? Because you're like, that's exactly what I thought myself, like from me, it's like the commitment to yourself. So like it's accountability for what you say. Okay, or what you do. So you want to actually be, even saying that yourself, that you wake up every morning and I can't commit to myself, means accountability, right? Because you say that off the time, which takes in account what you're saying. So like, I agree. Like, I'm happy. That's exactly the thing. You're accountable to exactly yourself.
And I think it's also your gift because, and I'll explain. I heard once a podcast with Peter Thiel of PayPal, and he apparently used to be a lawyer. And he worked at this big prestigious firm and he couldn't bear it and he left. And he described the day when he was walking out, with the boxes and the envious looks that, at least that was his interpretation, that has to be said. But he felt there's envious looks of him walking and just stepping out of this dream job, quote unquote. And he explained it by saying he was lucky enough that he just couldn't bear it. And I get it. And I think it's a bit of what you mean, that at the end of the day, you need to be lucky enough to not be able to bear what's not in tune with your inner self. And it's also a curse because we can't bear something that's very painful. But I think it's like a bit like teething pains for kids, talking about like babies and kids. Like once you go through it, like on the other side of fear and uncertainty and being unable to bear stuff, the most amazing things happen.
There's great joy because you then have everything that is good that happens to you is a result of you having overcome that fear, taken that leap, tried that new thing. And, you're so filled with this deep sense of pride that, it was hard, but I did that and no one will ever take that away from me.
Nobody can take it away from you.
As opposed to having somebody hand you something that just happened to work out, like that happened to me with Charity Water in a way. Like Charity Water in many ways happened to me, and Scott swept me up in his thing he was starting, and I came along and it all worked out beautifully. But at the end, this is why I think I still didn't have confidence after 10 years of working with him and building Charity Water. You would think we grew this huge thing. It was so successful. You would think I would have all the confidence.
But you don't know if it's you.
Yes, it happened to me. I didn't make it happen. Now that I am doing my own thing, coaching nonprofits, launched a successful course, have had 300 nonprofits go through it. I did all of that by myself. And I don't want it to sound like, oh, I did it, it's all me, blah, blah, blah. But you need those achievements in your life that only you can take credit for.
But are you able now, in retrospect, to sort of, even doing stuff now with startups, are you sort of realizing where you connected really important dots and are really a significant part of the success, to the extent that it probably wouldn't be the same without you? Like, are you able to acknowledge that now, or are you still not sure?
I still some days have moments where I'm like, if I didn't show up in Scott's life, he would have found another person just as good as me. I don't know why I still think that, but I still have those moments.
Just because the values of it is humility. So I'm going to let you go with that, because you have no good answer to say to your husband. So I'm going to let you go with that one. But no, I'm going to let her go in that one. Trust me, because it's a husband, right? It's not a boss. So
fine. But it started as a boss.
But I want to summarize something really important before we leave. Okay. So there's something you said, it was therapy, but I think there's a really good epiphany, and that's why we're excited about this. And I'm going to try and summarize it in a sentence. Okay. As an entrepreneur, you have a lot of decision making and a lot of risk taking. And you call it fearful and dreadful, the dividends, but I'm sort of going to try to give someone the bigger difference, because I think what you're saying with fearful, don't get confused with something that is exciting but has a risk, between something that is the best outcome is an outcome that you won't be happy with. Meaning you're dreading that anything less than the best outcome there is shitty. Like, when you make a decision, be excited, there is a risk, and don't be scared, because then there's no reward. And that's really important, because, in the 142 average decisions that an entrepreneur has to have in a day, that's a very useful tool to see if you're loyal to yourself. Okay, and if there's a chance the outcome could be worthwhile on a macro level. There's no way to have humility on that, because that's a key differentiator, and I love it. Like, that's a really good differentiator, and for you, and that's something that the listeners themselves, which are mostly entrepreneurs, I think it's a really good tool to use. So I thank you for that. Absolutely.
And also, can we say shit on this podcast?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think about this. I think what you're saying is very similar to the writer Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Big Magic. She talks about the shit sandwich, right? The stuff in the middle that no one wants to really do, but you are really willing to do because of the ultimate goal that this can achieve. And fear or nervousness is part of all of that. That shit between the sandwich. And, that's a really good test too. Like, if you are happy to do the worst parts of the job because you just enjoy the end result so much and it feels right for you, then you're on the right track. And if the worst part of the job is so dreadful for you that you don't even want to show up for work, then you're doing something wrong.
Right.
Amen. And I want to tell you, Vic, for what it's worth, I think your co-founder and husband is hands down a rock star. And I think that can be a little, confusing to be, in the light of that. But I am sure, for what it's worth, that you are a part of the success in a way that without you, this would not be the reality, and everything wouldn't materialize to what it did. And I think that, and I hope for you that you will sometime own it. And I just want to lastly ask you, what type of companies and startups could reach out to you, because that's a good fit, and how can they?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. You can find me at VikHarrison.com, and I spend a lot of time on Instagram at Vik Harrison, and I work with purpose-driven entrepreneurs and mostly these days nonprofits and founders of nonprofits.
That sounds like a rational fit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I hope that you keep materializing your integrity and values to make the world a better place. I'm pretty confident that you will. And I hope as many nonprofits identify this and reach out to you. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you both for such a fun time chatting. I loved it.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him.
real life.
Superpowers.